You know what? What can one of these quarterbacks or wide receivers do for me this year to make a wager? It's got to be the running conditions there for Jaden Daniels.
In regards to Jaden Daniels, you know I was on him in regards to the Heisman Trophy. I actually think he's going to do it on the ground, through the air, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, playing in Cliff Kingsbury's offense where he wants to spread it and throw it. I think he's going to put up dynamic numbers.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The sharpest football contest show in the land, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show, focuses on Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With 2 former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Talk about your freshman year at Alabama and even the redshirt year that got you ready to perform at the highest level.
You had to learn a lot about humility, about being patient to play at Alabama, and you still knew that you're going to have a shot to win a championship every year. And so that's the line. And so I think that's what's really missing with today's football. You got NIL, you got social media.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
All right, happy Monday. Welcome to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. I'm Craig Mish. A full recap of Week 2 in the National Football League is just ahead, and also a preview of the final game of the week on Monday Night Football. So thanks for being part of the show. Vinnie Iyer will join us, courtesy of Sporting News. Also, Matthew Waters from Legal Sports Report, and our SportsGrid insider, Adam Caplan, brings us the very latest. And aside from the crazy scores yesterday and the monster upsets that we saw, also some very significant early season injuries. And for those of you who play fantasy football, you got to be like spinning your head at this point with the amount of injuries that we've had just 2 weeks into the NFL season. And that's what we're going to begin here on the show. Kansas City needed a late penalty in order to defeat the Cincinnati Bengals, but now they'll need a running back behind Patrick Mahomes to carry the load because Isaiah Pacheco has a broken fibula in his leg. It's being reported by multiple outlets, and he's headed to IR, which means a 4-week absence, but the speculation is it could potentially even be longer than that. And fibula is a leg, folks, so this is a broken leg going to keep him out. I mean, a month would be on the optimistic side, I think, here. So right now, Pacheco out for Kansas City, and it's not like they have a viable backup. Their former first-round pick, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is on injured reserve as well, so they'll have to make some sort of move to pick up the pieces there. But at the very least, they are 2-0, and they needed every point that they could on a late 4th down penalty. The Chiefs end up getting a first down, and then Harrison Butker kicks a field goal. They were outplayed by the Cincinnati Bengals in this game, but as Chiefs magic would have it, they end up winning this one as Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and company end up winning, but not covering clearly that 6 or 5.5 point spread that was going into Sunday. Needless to say, Joe Burrow coming up just short in that game. A little argument with Jamar Chase in that game as well with some key penalties, but very dejected Burrow after the game talked about the loss.
You know, we felt good about the game plan. I was seeing it well. We were protecting. Just didn't do enough to get it done.
How frustrating is this loss compared to some
As frustrating as I've had.
Why?
I'm going to have to kind of think about that one a couple days, and you might have to ask me that again on Wednesday.
Really candid Joe Burrow. They outplayed Kansas City. Should have won that game, in my opinion, without a doubt. You know who else should have won last night? The Chicago Bears, if they had any semblance of a game plan. What in the world was going on in that game last night? They have a first-round quarterback throwing to the running backs over and over. The Houston Texans was just like, here, go ahead and win the game. And the Bears couldn't. I mean, normally I'm sleeping at the end of these things, but I just couldn't believe it. I was watching this one from start to finish. 19-13, the final. Another underdog, by the way, covering in this one as Houston ends up winning. It was really their defense that gave Caleb Williams fits all day long. The Bears' offensive line struggled, that's for sure. But, I mean, you have DJ Moore, you have Odunze, and all these different weapons, and it just felt like they didn't either trust the line or trust the quarterback in this one. But good teams win and great teams cover. I guess that's fair to say. If you took the Bears, you came out on top. And we'll start with D'Amico Ryans, who knew that it was basically the defense that ended up carrying them in this one.
Well, it starts up front with our defensive line, like Will, Daniil, Mario, all the guys. The way they were rushing, like together, and the way we were covering in the back end, that really set things apart for us. So, you know, credit to Sting and Kamari for the way they cover, allowing those guys to get the pressure. You don't get pressure unless the coverage is tight. So those guys cover well and allowed the rush to get there.
I think right now the defense of Houston, carrying them for the most part, played well against Indianapolis again last week as well. Meanwhile, on the offensive side for the Bears, again, Caleb Williams, top pick in the draft, struggling through his first two games. They did beat Tennessee thanks to some big mistakes by Tennessee. Caleb Williams after the game last night, basically talking about the key word of the NFL these days, execution.
Not coming out with a win, not executing, when we needed to as a team. Myself throwing 2 interceptions. It's not something that I've done. Something that I do is turn the ball over. It's not really my thing. So, I think those things probably the things that I'm most, frustrated about. Back out there, we didn't execute the way we needed to, and we're going to keep getting better. Everything's about the response. It's week 2. It's what the guys are. Obviously, I'm a young guy, but I understand it's a long season. Understanding that it's week 2, understanding that we're going to respond, and just get better every day, get better at practice. All these different things throughout the weeks, attention to details and things like that.
Still a long season, but Justin Fields, Caleb Williams don't look that much different to me, at least through a couple of games. All right, let's get to the other games in the NFL. The New York Jets pick up their first win of the season. They needed a late touchdown. Aaron Rodgers delivered, and they end up beating the Tennessee Titans, who fall to 0-2. Final score 24-17. Jets' rare road favorite, winning and covering in the NFL. That's like dinosaur style these days, but they did very late in the game. Breece Hall had a big game. Braylon Allen scored a couple of touchdowns when Hall came out of the game, so the Jets improved to 1-1, and they play Thursday. Meanwhile, the one of the late games, the Cardinals-Rams, this game was over before it even started. I turned on for the late games, and it was 21-0. Marvin Harrison, 4 catches, 130, and 2 touchdowns. The story from the Rams out of this one. Puka Nacua on injured reserve. There's a chance right now they will not have Cooper Kupp for the immediate future. He left with an ankle injury. Meanwhile, Baker Mayfield, one of the big stunners of the day, they go to Detroit and win as underdogs 20-16. The final, Chris Godwin had 7 catches, 117 yards and a touchdown. Baker playing fantastic, running the ball into the end zone as well. And they gave, Detroit gave them some opportunities they shouldn't have had. Some interesting play calling as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Dan Campbell talks about that in our Sound Off segment. And also the New Orleans Saints go to Dallas and crush the Cowboys. Final 44-19. Alvin Kamara had one of those yearly games where he scores 3 touchdowns. It was yesterday. 115 on the ground and 3, 2 catches, 65 through the air and a touchdown. He was just absolutely fantastic. All right, 49ers, again, favorites going on the road and losing outright, 23-17. Minnesota Vikings come up with the win there. Sam Darnold played well. The Seahawks beat the Patriots in overtime, and Geno Smith needed to rally the troops late for this one. They end up winning. The Browns beat the Jaguars 18-13. Trevor Lawrence now has lost 7 games in a row. And the Raiders, 8.5-point underdogs and trailing by 2 touchdowns late in the game, come back to win 26-23. Crazy games yesterday in the NFL. All right, new AP poll is out. Texas is now number one. The Longhorns have played fantastic football, whether it has been Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning. Manning threw 5 touchdowns over the weekend. Miami's also in the top 10. Georgia escapes in Lexington 13-12. Georgia got to get that offense going. And the Apple Cup, very early on in the season, Washington State beats Washington by a final of 24-19. Usually they play this game. Don't they play this like the night, Thanksgiving night or something like that? But not this year, I guess. All right, Yankees, Red Sox. Yankees take 3 out of 4. They're controlling the division. Lots of words going back and forth with this one, with the Yankees and Red Sox arguing, fighting all weekend. Story for another day. We don't have time for it. Tyler Glasnow out for the season with an elbow injury. He packed up his gear and left this weekend in Atlanta before heading to Miami. Kind of bizarre story there. How about the Detroit Tigers, folks? They are right in the midst of this playoff chase, 2.5 games back of the 3rd wild card spot. They win again, 3 in a row. Maybe the Tigers sneak into the playoffs. Also, Alec Boehm has been activated off the injured list. He had a left hand strain. Over in Indiana, we got some updates on sports betting revenue. More than $300 million wagered online in sports books, pushing the year to date over $3 billion. How about Caitlin Clark over the weekend? 35 points as the Fever end up getting a win. And Caitlin Clark has been red hot for them. Asia Wilson, first player to score 1,000 points. John Rahm wins the LIV Golf Tournament this weekend. Vinnie Iyer joins us next.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards.
That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
Talk about your freshman year at Alabama and even the redshirt year that got you ready to perform at the highest level.
You had to learn a lot about humility, about being patient to play at Alabama, and you still knew that you're going to have a shot to win a championship every year. And so that's the line. And so I think like that's what's really missing with today's football. You got NIL, you got social media.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus coach of the year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play's there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? Man, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
NewsWire. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Do you believe what you've seen through 2 weeks of the National Football League season? If you believe everything that you see, you're going to get fooled because that's not the way that this league works. Usually things sort of even themselves out. Let's bring in Vinnie Iyer from Sporting News. And Vinnie, we'll start with the good stuff, which has to be the New Orleans Saints. And as somebody like yourself who follows the league pretty closely, I don't get too surprised with outcomes of games because these are human beings and it's sports. But I guess the way that the Saints are winning has been very surprising to me. Like if they went to Dallas and won, Cincinnati may have gone to Kansas City and won, I would have said no big deal. But what's going on with the Saints? Why is their offense exploding in the way that it is?
Yeah, they do have a new coordinator, Clint Kubiak, and he brings the 49ers system with him, and maybe just putting Derek Carr in more comfortable situations, making it about the running game and opening things up downfield, and we've seen that. They're taking their shots and being aggressive, and Rashid Shaheed set the tone with big play touchdowns in both games, and then Alvin Kamara has looked rejuvenated. This offensive line is playing really well. So their offense has been the story here so far. We thought their defense could be pretty good, but we thought Derek Carr, hey, there was rumblings from the fans of wanting Spencer Rattler in there, and then disappointment overall over this coaching staff and Dennis Allen. Now they're 2-0. They have a big win against the Cowboys rolling in just around the corner. The Chiefs will be there, so we'll get a good look at how good they actually are, right, going forward. But two impressive ways to start the season, and I don't know if they're going to keep up this offensive explosion, but it's definitely a team that again, there's already been a big shock here in the first 2 weeks, the way they've taken control and pulled away from both of their opponents.
Yeah, I got breaking news. They're not going to keep 40 points a game up, Vinny. It's not going to happen there. But I'll tell you, their odds have jumped more than any other team in the NFL to win the NFC. They're now just 13-1. They were not even in the stratosphere of winning. I mean, think about a board here that does not include Tampa Bay and includes New Orleans. I mean, come on here. It seems pretty crazy. Yeah. Green Bay hanging in there. Dallas will provide you the worst odds of all. I mean, they could be 6-10, Vinny, and they'll still be 10-1 to win something. A lesson learned, I think, for a lot of Cowboys bettors there yesterday. But, look, San Francisco, I think, will still be there. Maybe this is the best opportunity to take Detroit at 6-1. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I still like Detroit. I mean, there are a lot of little things they did wrong. They kind of made sure the Buccaneers were positioned to win that game late. There was some bad clock management, maybe some bad decisions. Really, really bad decisions by Jared Goff in that game. He did not play well. And it was just weird because the Lions have played very well at home, especially Goff. The Cowboys have played very well at home, especially Dak Prescott. Two things that usually do not happen, them struggling and turning over the ball multiple times. And that's what happened in those games, essentially here. So the Bucs, so you got to hand it to them. You're right. I mean, they should kind of be on the radar a little bit more. I mean, this is a team that was good last year and were able to beat the Eagles and get into the divisional playoffs. And then they beat the team that they lost to in the playoffs, of the Lions. So I think they've been just as impressive as the Saints, maybe more so with their defense, but this division might be a little bit more interesting except for the Panthers this season.
Yeah, and generally speaking, the Saints have owned the Bucs, even with Brady. So, I mean, maybe that's part of it, too. All right, so now let's go to the flip. Let's go to the Jacksonville Jaguars here for a minute. They start off the season 0-2 after a disappointing finish. This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick. Playing at Clemson, high-level, championships, getting to championships. The Urban Meyer thing, that came and went. Like, I don't get it, man. Like, I do not get it. I don't. They have weapons. I don't understand it. It seems like he's always on the run, rolling out. When he runs, he's always doing a good job running. It feels like the running game is there too. I'm just missing something with Jacksonville.
Yeah, they flash a lot of big plays. It's not just on offense, but defense. There's a lot of talent. I mean, you have Trevor Lawrence, you have Travon Walker. You've got a lot of high draft picks in there. They've invested quite a bit of money in free agency. It tells me they're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do game plan wise, the Jaguars are going to be fine. But it has not worked here for half a season. I mean, they're 1-7. Lawrence just seems like naturally skittish when he doesn't need to be, and just running around, not sure exactly what he's doing. He's looking for big plays, maybe too much. I think underrated. I mean, Evan Ingram was out. I think he likes to throw to the middle of the field. Maybe he's not a deep ball guy that feels comfortable extending plays and taking those hits. So there are a lot of questions with Lawrence here going forward, but the biggest question mark is now Jaguars are 0-2, Colts are 0-2, Titans are 0-2. This is looking like the Texans' walkover for a second straight season.
Yeah, it does. All right, so Monday Night Football. Line 5.5. Eagles minus 5.5. No A.J. Brown, of course, for Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts is usually much better with Brown than without Brown. I would say tonight, I mean, if the trend just continues, I mean, is it just this blind, just take the points here, Vinny, because we're going to be in the fourth quarter and some team's going to have the ball down 3, down 5. Like, I got to tell you, I just don't feel comfortable laying any points in the NFL above like 1 right now. Like, no one looks great.
Yeah, I mean, I have this game right around that total. I think the total shrank a little bit with the A.J. Brown news that we had that he's not playing. Now, the Falcons will see. Kirk Cousins did play well in primetime in Philadelphia last year with the Vikings. It was actually a week 2 game, but typically his history is not good in these games. And I think Vic Fangio and this Eagles defense will see some things from the first game and get back on track here. So I don't expect necessarily an offensive explosion in this one. The Falcons defense with Raheem Morris is also a little bit better. So I can see it somewhere 27-20. I think the Eagles are going to have to grind it out, however, a little bit with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley on the ground to pull away. So it's tight for me, but I'm feeling maybe just a little bit on the under still at 47 is where I had it. So again, you can go that way, but it's very tight to call here.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, Vinny, great to catch up with you here on the show. We'll talk again later in the week. Thanks again.
All right, thanks, Craig.
All right, coming up next, we will hear from Aaron Rodgers, quarterback of the New York Jets, also Dan Campbell on their loss to the Buccaneers. And the story prior to the weekend of football, and it still continues to be, is the Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. Dolphins have not yet signed another quarterback, by the way. Interesting note there. We'll be back after this.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of a week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoff.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
Talk about your freshman year at Alabama and even the redshirt year that got you ready to perform at the highest level.
You had to learn a lot about humility, about being patient to play at Alabama. And you still knew that you're going to have a shot to win a championship every year. And so that's the line. And so I think like that's what's really missing with today's football. You got NIL, you got social media.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus coach of the year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be a success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? Man, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
NewsWire. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. It's time now to hear from a couple of interesting figures in the National Football League. Dan Campbell of the Detroit Lions, Aaron Rodgers, the New York Jets, and our very own Casey Hudson weighs in on what's next for the Miami Dolphins. And by the way, I said last segment the Dolphins did not sign a quarterback yet, and they just did 5 minutes ago. So stay with me here. I'm going to tell you who that is. It's time now for the Sports Grid Sound Off. All right, we'll break up the New York Jets. It was not easy, but they ended up going on the road, winning and covering against the Tennessee Titans, which means that Aaron Rodgers got his first win as quarterback of the New York Jets. But in Aaron Rodgers fashion, he reminds us that he actually did play for the Jets in a win, albeit for about 30 seconds. Here was his post-game talking about picking up his second win as quarterback of the Jets.
Technically my second. We all know that. Somehow that first one counts. 4 important plays. Yeah, well, I don't know if they count on that, but yeah, it feels great. It feels great. Been a long time coming. I was telling Evan, in the post game on the field, I hadn't had that in a long time. Being able to have that interview on the field after the game means you won, means you played halfway decent. So good to get a win. These are kind of the games you look back on late in the season. You're thankful that you won these because if we want to be a great team, we got to win in these type of environments against teams like that.
Jets will play the Patriots this week. Whether you like or dislike Aaron Rodgers, it makes no difference. Him being in the NFL and being a prominent figure gets attention. It's good for the National Football League. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. We've lost a lot of the legends. A lot of them have retired in the NFL. Phillip Rivers retired a few years ago. Tom Brady just retired. Drew Brees just retired a few years ago. Peyton Manning, several years ago, Peyton Manning retired. I mean, Rodgers is sort of one of a kind left, headed right to the Hall of Fame as a quarterback as soon as he's done. So needless to say, good to see him back on the field playing well. Meanwhile, the Detroit Lions, very bizarre play calling at the end of the half, attempting a field goal, not getting it because of a penalty, and even at the end of the game, some bizarre stuff happening, which is very rare because I think we would say unequivocally Dan Campbell has been great as the head coach of the Lions. But as even Campbell said, not yesterday.
I asked for improvement from last week, was the story. And we did improve. We did improve. And their coach cost them. Their head coach cost them this one. So, critical error into half. And 100% on me. We improved. There's areas we got to continue to improve on, but it's not okay. So, anyway, we fought. We got down there. Certainly offense, we double up in yardage. We get down the red zone. We can't get, TDs. And that was kind of the story of the game. Defense, I thought, played lights out. Gave us 2 shots there at the end of the game, and we just couldn't finish it out.
Rare candor from a head coach in the NFL. And by the way, I think he's right. I would not overreact to the Lions losing that game at all last week. Still one of the best teams in the NFL. Meanwhile, the Miami Dolphins have signed quarterback Snoop Huntley to replace Tua Tagovailoa immediately on the roster, but not as a starter. The starter will be Skylar Thompson. Here's Casey Hudson from SportsGrid on the Tua injury.
Week 2 of the NFL is already almost in the books, but we can all agree it got off to a pretty scary start when we saw Tua drive up the middle and take a pretty scary hit, which leaves a lot of question marks around not only the Miami Dolphins 2024-25 season and how the market has fluctuated in terms of them being in the AFC East, as well as making the playoffs, as well as their chances for Super Bowl, but what does the NFL career look like for Tua? He's got $131 million guarantee sitting there, but he's meeting with neurologists next week to see what the most advisable move would be for him in his career. And I think most of us can agree that it's probably time for him to hang it up. 4 concussions in 5 years is very scary, but the back-to-back concussions alone already had a lot of people wondering if he should have even laced up those cleats yet again. And after seeing that hit on Thursday night, I think we'd all agree in order for him to have a future, in order for him to be there for his family, he's going to be financially set as long as he is smart. I think that we're probably going to be seeing the end of Tua's NFL career here down the pipeline.
All right. Thanks, Casey. And, good points Casey makes. The only difference of opinions, I would say, is I don't think that we would all agree. I think Tua probably does not agree and would like to continue playing in the NFL. And I think we still have to wait and see what the doctors say before forming our own opinion. We'll be back with Matthew Waters next.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoff.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was Lincoln! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
Talk about your freshman year at Alabama and even the redshirt year that got you ready to perform at the highest level.
You had to learn a lot about humility, about being patient to play at Alabama, and you still knew that you're going to have a shot to win a championship every year. And so that's the line. And so I think that's what's really missing with today's football. You got NIL, you got social media.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus coach of the year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? I mean, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
NewsWire. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. If you're a sports bettor in Washington, D.C., stay tuned because some of those kiosks that you see around town are going to look a little bit different in October. Let's bring in Matthew Waters from Legal Sports Report. We'll talk about that. By the way, everything we discuss over at LegalSportsReport.com. You can read about it as well. Matt, great to have you back here on NewsWire. Hope you had a good weekend.
I did, sir. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get started here. And, once upon a time when sports betting became legal, the first company to really be out in the forefront with it, not FanDuel, not DraftKings, it was actually Fox Bet, because Fox NFL Sunday popped up and it was like, boom, here's where you can bet, Fox Bet. Mixed results there. I would say probably didn't work out. But boy, Fox had, a card in their pocket that they're pulling out here. I didn't even realize this, that they had the option to purchase a piece of FanDuel. Tell us more about that. Good move by them.
Great move by them. What happened, Craig, was that Flutter bought a company called the Stars Group, and the Stars Group was the company that partnered with Fox to run Fox Bet, which, just an aside, Fox Bet only closed a year ago. That it feels like it happened so much longer ago to me than just a year. But so that is mostly why Fox Bet wound up dying, because Flutter owned FanDuel, stronger brand. And so they just kind of did what they had to with Fox Bet. And then they came to the agreement last year that it was cut off. But Fox does have this agreement to buy an 18.6% stake in FanDuel, and it's been in court for a little while, and things were messy because of this. Part of it is the reason why we have Flutter listed in the U.S. and not FanDuel, because Fox would have to give their approval toward any IPO moving forward. Now, Lachlan Murdoch, the CEO of Fox, said that they will be acting on this at an analyst conference last week. The main reason is because right now it will cost Fox about $4.3 billion to buy that stake. The stake is valued at, has FanDuel valued at $20 million. And there was arguments over that too. Fox wanted to pay it $11 billion. And then FanDuel a couple years ago was saying, well, we're worth like $30 million. So they came in at $20 million. The estimate for FanDuel now, though, is it's worth about $35 billion as a standalone, not as part of Flutter. So that puts that 18.6% stake at about $6.5 billion. So Lachlan Murdoch came out and said, well, there's no way we're going to miss out on $2 billion on the table. That is essentially what it comes down to. They have this, and he said, by the way, we think it's going to keep growing. The tricky part about this, Craig, is that with a stake that big, anything over 5%, you have to be licensed in the gaming world. And so Lachlan said that they have started with these gaming licenses, and the deal cannot go through until then. Now, luckily, they have plenty of time. 2030 is when the deal would expire, the option would expire. So they will be able to do it at some point, but we don't know how long that'll take. It seems like the licensing process can move quickly in some of these new states with how fast the apps get up, but a lot of the states work off of temporary licenses, and it'll say something in the law to the effect of, well, if you already operate in 5 or more U.S. states, we can just assume that you're okay. We'll give you that temporary license. We'll check the very bare minimum things, and then we'll do a deeper dive into you. And Fox isn't going to have that luxury, so it'll take a little while to get them licensed. But the other part of it is he said, look, we love sports betting to interact with sports fans. I mean, they own half the NFL every weekend, right? And then if they get a stake in FanDuel, they'll just be even more incentivized. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. I always expected Fox to go through with this option because, again, FanDuel has just been on a rocket ever since sports betting started. But to hear that it is actually going to happen and that the licensing is through is definitely big news.
Yeah, I mean, having a piece of FanDuel or DraftKings at this point has to be on the positive side of ownership. Now, if you owned or the owners of Gambit were in play, that's probably not that was not a good investment because Gambit, as we know, is now out of Washington, D.C. That's primarily where they were. And they had their form of, I guess, sports betting operation through these kiosks, is my understanding. And again, I'm reading about this over Legal Sports Report. But they've been out. We've known this for a while. But what we didn't know is who was going to be taking over these kiosks. And my understanding is there has to be more than 50 in place by the beginning of October. So without ruining the story completely, which sports betting company is taking over for Gambit? And what did I miss as part of the story?
Well, it is an interesting story. It's Caesars that's going to take over. And basically, at some point between today and October, they're supposed to get those kiosks in. It has to be in by that October date. It's interesting, Craig, because Gambit was a partnership between the DC Lottery and Intralot. And Intralot came into the U.S. thinking, well, we can get recreational bettors. And so we're going to juice those lines a little bit more. And the DC Lottery, unfortunately, said, okay, cool, we're with that. And it didn't work, right? We had, in the middle of the pandemic, Craig, you had people lining up around the block to go to the William Hill kiosk at Capital One Arena instead of betting online with Gambit. That's how bad the odds were. And so it's a bit poetic justice that Caesars is taking over because Caesars is the one that bought William Hill. So Caesars will now be in charge of all of those kiosks. Look, those kiosks have been the source of a few interesting stories from DC. We had one guy at a sushi shop take them for almost $1 million. They had to cut out some sports they were offering because of that. The kiosks have been interesting, but Caesars is going to take over control of them now. And we had a little bit more news from DC last week as Fanatics is now live in the DC market as well. So it's a huge shift for DC, going from only Gambit being available throughout DC on your phone, except for those federal areas, to now you have Caesars, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM. And the numbers show it. The numbers, they've been doing very well so far and compared to what it just was with Gambit. So DC sports betting, we're going to keep talking about it, Craig, because more people are looking at it saying, maybe I can get in there. And the OLG tried for so long, the Office of Lottery and Gaming in DC, they tried for so long to say, look, COVID just ruined sports betting in DC. People work from home. We don't get the same kind of traffic. And we're seeing that, no, it was just a bad sports betting product.
Yep, would agree. All right, let's close it out here and end on this story that's now, I mean, it feels like it's a couple years old already. These allegations against these athletes that were at Iowa and Iowa State, if I'm not mistaken, they were, I believe, they were found to do less doing or almost no wrongdoing as far as these allegations were concerned. And now everybody, of course, that was an athlete that was involved is now jumping back on board, saying, "Well, you came after us, we're going to come after you." And I know there's an update in the case.
Well, and rightly so, Craig. We had four more plaintiffs join in, and a couple from Iowa State, a couple from Iowa. So it was 11 total. It was 10 athletes, and then I think a basketball manager who joined in. But basically what happened was they used this technology to see where people were gambling on these apps to track hits on that. And it was done without a warrant. And the investigating body knew that they needed a warrant before they did it. So naturally, it all got thrown out. And now people are coming back and saying, whoa, we missed out on senior seasons for this. We missed out on, I dropped draft picks because of this, whatever it could be. These guys were obviously affected. And so they want a little bit of that back.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, this is the problem here. Sometimes aggressiveness can get you in trouble. And on the flip side, maybe it'll work out for these student athletes who are suing. Thanks again, Matthew. We'll read about that story and everything else over at LegalSportsReport.com. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, sir. Take care.
All right, coming up next, Adam Caplan will join us here on the show. Lots of movement in the NFL, but no bigger rivalry right now, it would seem, between Cincinnati and Kansas City. Every game going right down to the wire, including yesterday. We'll talk about that next.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
Talk about your freshman year at Alabama and even the redshirt year that got you ready to perform at the highest level.
You had to learn a lot about humility, about being patient to play at Alabama, and you still knew that you're going to have a shot to win a championship every year. And so that's the line. And so I think that's what's really missing with today's football. You got NIL, you got social media.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus coach of the year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? I mean, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
NewsWire. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Each and every Monday, we have Adam Caplan, our SportsGrid insider, here on NewsWire to go over the results from the weekend and, some news updates, injury stuff, a lot going on this early in the NFL. It does feel like more, Adam, this year. Maybe we say this every year, but it does feel like more significant injury talk, more significant stories coming out of the first couple of weeks from the Dolphins, now the Chiefs. We've got a big one, maybe Minnesota, the Rams, a couple of injuries too. So there's just a lot to dive into, and we don't have a lot of time, so let's get into it. Great rivalry between these two teams, Kansas City, Cincinnati. If lessons should be learned, it should be just take the points wherever you're getting them, because this game is like Baltimore and Pittsburgh. It comes right down to the wire. Last play of the game, there was a somewhat of a controversial penalty call, but if you go back and watch, there was a penalty committed. Butker kicks a field goal to win. So I know everyone is indicting the Bengals right now, but I am not. In fact, like if I had to buy a team low right now, I think it'd be them.
Yeah, definitely. And by the way, that division, Craig, AFC North is up for grabs. I mean, who knew Baltimore would be 0-2? I covered this business 26 years, and there are always surprises. I did not see the Ravens being 0-2, but getting back to this game specifically, in that team, the Bengals playing out of the AFC North, look, their week one was pitiful, embarrassing at home. You have the specter of the Jamar Chase contract, whether you're going to get it or not. He's not getting it. They were in a bad way. Their timing was off. Look, Joe Burrow was better this past game again in KC. And you've touched on this. There's something about this rivalry, no matter where the teams are, they bring their game up a next level. It was an amazing game for a week 2 game. Just not what I was expecting based on the way that the Bengals played. In fact, I do radio every Thursday in Kansas City. And I was like, well, guys, I don't think T. Higgins is going to play. He didn't. They had a bad week 1. They're mentally. I wish they were playing this game late in the season. Who knew, Craig? I mean, this is the beauty. This is why we love the NFL. You never know what's going to happen. And the other thing is the league loves what they call competitive balance. We certainly had that in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, honestly, it is hard as a bettor to lay any points right now in the NFL. I mean, you're literally getting a touchdown. These teams win outright, let alone getting points. Real quick on the Chiefs here, with the news that Isaiah Pacheco is going to injured reserve, the backup is like a fullback. Samaje Perine is sort of like, they got him at the last minute there. I mean, I guess they could grab McKinnon or somebody else if they wanted to. I know Edwards-Helaire is on IR also with the PTSD. Do you think the Chiefs do anything here? Do they just bring Helaire back in a few weeks?
They're going to have to do something because Pacheco is their starting running back. Okay, he doesn't need to be a 3-down back. That's why they have Samaje Perine to help them on 3rd down. But they're going to have to do something now. Generic Prince, that's the guy Carson Steele beat out. So look, Generic Prince is on another team's practice squad. They could bring him back, but they need an upgrade. They're going to have to look at waiver wire. I'd expect Brett Veach to work out some running backs this week. Usually Tuesday's the workout day. And they'll figure it out. They have to have a running game. There's no question about it. The Edwards-Helaire thing is, as you mentioned, that there's nothing they could do about that. Right. There's not much out there. They're in a tough spot right now. Once we start the season, teams are trying to figure out what their depth looks like. And this is a big blow to them. And let's face it, the Chiefs barely won that game. They're not going to have Hollywood Brown this season, who had that significant clavicle injury. That anytime you're in the sterno area here, and then he has to have something done. It's not good. So they didn't look good. I give them credit. The Chiefs found a way to win. It was not easy for them to get that job done. But look, they got that job done. One of only 5 teams in the AFC to be undefeated right now.
Yeah, it's an incredible stat considering how they played, as you mentioned. The Ravens, and I was very fortunate to be able to watch a lot yesterday, Adam, and I was watching this game with the Raiders and Ravens and was like, okay, I don't know if the Ravens are going to cover this game, but they're going to win. I mean, they just took their foot completely off the pedal offensively, unlike Harbaugh, in a very big way. I couldn't understand it. And then Minshew Mania ran wild. Truthfully, Devontae Adams made some insane catches to keep that game going, but no excuse for them to lose at home. And maybe we should just simply be giving credit to the Raiders for fighting through that.
Because when they were down 10, I was like, okay, here we go. The usual put away for the Ravens. It's what we thought it would be. And they choked the game. Their offense struggled. They're still not there with the Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry run game. Craig, I'm a little surprised by this. I know it's only 2 games. We're going to give it more time here. But I'm a little bit surprised that they have not had the kind of impact that I saw in training camp when I was with the Ravens. We're expecting that to happen at some point. Look, they have a new defensive coordinator, Zach Gore, at 32 years old, the youngest defensive coordinator in the National Football League. We need to give him time. It's not like they're playing badly, but you would expect them to win a game like that at home. And one thing you mentioned, I do want to touch on here about picking games and so forth. I've told Scott Farrell this for 4 years now. You have to understand in the regular season, it's injuries, it's how motivated a club is to win a game. Yes, every team wants to win. but there's a mindset of once you get to the playoffs, you could be eliminated. It's just a different mindset where it's clearly about matchups. Where I like the coaching staff, I like obviously like a team's roster. Here there's so many variables when you're trying to pick games. I agree with you, man. It is really, really difficult because sometimes it looks really easy. It's actually very, very difficult.
Yeah, and Adam, I mean, think about it. If your name is not Carolina, outside of maybe the very bottom of the NFL, outside of that, 11 on 11, is there really that big of a difference between the players on these teams? Maybe one or two each side. So if that's the case and the line is +7 or +8 or +10, I don't know how you just immediately don't say, you know what? Let me take the points here because there's a shot. I mean, outside of, again, the very bottom teams in the NFL, speaking of which, Carolina is not going to win that division. Saints +125, Bucks +175. Those teams are both 2-0. Atlanta, I mean, who knows? Honestly, they could win tonight against Philadelphia. I'm not going to rule anything out in these crazy games. But it definitely seems to me that the Saints and the Bucks have been, you start off 2-0, you got a really good shot to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised at the Saints. I'm not with the Bucks. I did pick them to win division when Pharrell and I gave our on coast to coast. We gave our divisional picks. He and I saw it the same way. We thought the Falcons were overhyped. They got to get through their situations there, Atlanta, with their new scheme. But remember now for Philly tonight, and you talk about the spread 6.5. No A.J. Brown for the Eagles tonight. That is absolutely huge.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can lay points right now in the NFL. Thanks again, Adam, for coming on. Appreciate it.
You got it.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoff.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
Talk about your freshman year at Alabama and even the redshirt year that got you ready to perform at the highest level.
You had to learn a lot about humility, about being patient to play at Alabama. And you still knew that you're going to have a shot to win a championship every year. And so that's the line. And so I think that's what's really missing with today's football. You got NIL, you got social media.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus coach of the year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be a success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? Man, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
NewsWire. Only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Did you catch what happened in the Green Bay Packers game yesterday to the center on that team? I want to tell you about that. Also, another home run ball not being given back, and we'll dive into that and a whole lot more. It's time now for some last licks. I have to steal something that I saw on social media. I'm going to steal it. This is not me coming up with it. This was a chunk play, okay? Not my term, someone else's, not mine. I believe ESPN may have said it or something like that. I'm stealing it, using it here on the show. The center for the Green Bay Packers, his name is Josh Myers. Just before he snapped the ball to Malik Willis, who is now the quarterback of the Packers, if you haven't been paying attention, he, unfortunately, because of the heat or just the conditioning, he may have thrown up on the ball. This is true. He did. Now, this is not my first throw-up experience this weekend. In fact, my son was playing in a game this weekend, and it's so hot here in Florida. It was like over 100 degrees. The umpire threw up and had to leave the game. So 2 different throw-ups for me watching this weekend live. Good news is both guys are okay. Bad news is barfing is now in. Is that what's going on here? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm listening to radio and stuff. A lot of people are saying they've never seen that happen before, where right before the play is hiked, he throws up on the ball. Like, he couldn't move it. I guess he couldn't move it, right? When you think about it, he couldn't move the ball or else it'd be a false start. All right, let's now go to San Francisco, where the Giants are getting ready to wrap up their uneventful season. At least something happened good for them as they run down the stretch here. Helio Ramos, he is an outfielder for the Giants. He hit an opposite field home run. He's a righty, and it went into McCovey Cove, and it ended up being a splash hit. I don't know if you're familiar, but they have water in the outfield. Now, also on top of this story, it even takes a further dip, as the home run ball was not given back to Helio Ramos. It's the same guy who's always out there in the canoe. They compare him to Zach Campbell. I don't know if that's really the case here, but either way, he caught the ball. And this guy who caught it has had this dispute with the Giants all season long because he says, look, I'll give you guys back all of the baseballs that you want. I just want a parking pass at the park because it's impossible to park there. You can take public transportation there. It's great in San Francisco, the Bay Area, but to actually park at the park, you really can't. So he wants a spot. They won't give it to him. So he said that he is going to let the Hall of Fame have it as long as they want, and then he'll take the ball back. I don't know. Can they work this thing out? Can you give this guy a parking spot? I guess it must be worth a lot of money. What could it be worth? $20,000 for the year? $30,000 for the year? And this guy's willing to give you all the balls back. You just have to do that. Seems like a no-brainer to me. But again, these teams fight the people who catch the home run balls. I've never understood this before. With all of the money that they're making, can't take care of the fans. I'm always on the side of the fan here. All right, finally, if you missed last night's game between Chicago and Houston, you missed this guy on the sidelines wearing a chain. The Houston Texans have an individual on their sidelines to be the chain holder. This is for Tank Dell of the Houston Texans. Yes, this is literally a job of an individual to hang on to the chains of the players to make sure that they don't get ruined and then give them back to them at the end of the game. This chain must be worth a lot of money. Is there no savings deposit box that this could go in? Is there no one that Tank Dell or any of the Houston Texans trust to hold their chains? I guess not. It has to be on their field during the game. And how much is this guy getting paid? Is he getting paid by the player? I mean, we have to do a further dive into this. In fact, before the end of the week, we'll get this figured out, and we'll tell you here on NewsWire. But we're out of time. That's going to do it for the show today. Thanks again to Vinnie Iyer of Sporting News. Also, thanks to Matthew Waters of Legal Sports Report and our SportsGrid insider, Adam Caplan, for joining us here on the program. Of course, thanks to our director, Luke, and, of course, thanks to our producer, Frank. As a reminder, we've got some great programming coming up for you here, so make sure you stay with us here on SportsGrid, because Caplan and crew, they're coming up 1 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you stay tuned for that show, followed by Pharrell Coast to Coast at 3 o'clock Eastern, Game Time Decisions at 6, and then a little bit of a different wrinkle here on Mondays because, of course, we've got Monday Night Football. So Pro Football Today will be on immediately after that, followed by In-Game Live, Pro Football Game Day, and then Pro Football Today post-game. So that is the upcoming schedule here on SportsGrid today. We will be back with you for another edition of NewsWire tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, as we're here every single Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern. We'll have updates with all of the injuries, including Cooper Kupp of the Rams, a lot of West Coast injuries yesterday, so we'll have the updates there, tell you everything that's going on in the NFL as we get ready for Week 3 starting tomorrow. Have a great night, everyone.